Tonight on America's Dumbest Criminals, meet a crook who decides to drop in unannounced at a car dealership. Discover the back-breaking burden of stealing $3,000 in coins. And what happens if you mess with a wire surging with 15,000 volts of electricity? For the shocking answers, stay where you are. You're wired into the crooked dealings of America's Dumbest Criminals.
Delta 1566, give me a call on your primary.
Now, welcome your hosts for America's Dumbest Criminals, Daniel Butler and Debbie Allen.
Hi there.
Hey, Debbie, how's it going?
Going great.
All right.
You want to explain to your friend right there?
What? Oh, no, I just cashed my check for co-hosting the show.
Yeah. But it looks like you're making more than me. Wait a minute.
Huh?
And it's jingling. What is the jingling
Well,
noise?
yeah, I've got almost, $60 in change in here. Yeah.
And that's because?
Well, it's so I can tell all my TV co-host buddies that I bring down some heavy coin for doing this show. Plus, I'm developing some pretty impressive biceps. You want to feel that?
Go ahead, make your muscle.
Hey, hey, what?
Weenie.
No, well, a ton of coins figure into one of our stories that we're going to get to later. But first, we meet up with a real homewrecker.
Yeah, and if you've ever gone in a model home and said, this is exactly how I want my house to look, don't follow through like this guy did.
Nope, we've got him caught on camera.
We received a call for a burglary at one of our sample homes in the township. When they called for the burglary, they said the furniture that was inside the sample home had been taken, including a sofa, some stuffed chairs, and some other items. When we arrived there, they advised us that there was a swatch from the sofa, an armchair cover, that had been left behind by the actors. And we followed the footprints in the mud across the road right to the back of the house. When we knocked on the back door, the subjects came running out of the bedroom, looked out the front, assuming that the knock had come from the front door. When they looked out, they saw the police car. I'm watching from the back door. I see them pick up the sofa and the chair, carry it into the bedroom, carry out the stuff, I guess, that they had there originally, put that in the room, and then they go to answer the door. At that point, I knocked on the back door and told them, hey, we saw you carry this stuff back into the back bedroom. We also took their shoes, that we could match the footprints up to those that we had found in the mud. And at that point, they confessed and carried the stolen goods back to the sample home for me. Using all my years of detective training and my training at the FBI Academy, why, I was able to track the subjects down just by following the muddy footprints.
Well, I'm sure the guy that robbed that model home has now become a model prisoner.
Sure, yeah.
Hey, have you ever seen those car dealers who talk about how they've knocked the roof off high prices? Well, we found a crook who tried to do pretty much the same thing.
We take you to Clinton, South Carolina for the midnight madness of something to remember me by.
All right, one time we had a fella break into a car dealership, and we got a call from a car dealership that morning, and we went over there. They found a hole in the ceiling, and looking at the hole in the ceiling, he'd climbed down upon some file cabinets. We started looking around the file cabinet, decided to start brushing for prints and everything. We found a piece of paper on the floor. Picked up the piece of paper, and it was a warrant for a fellow we'd arrested a few weeks earlier for another burglary. So what had happened, it fell out of his pocket. If they were all this easy, we'd catch a lot more fish.
Daniel, for this next one, I turn matters over to you. Will you please use your command of the English language to delicately describe this next surveillance footage?
Yeah, well, okay, let's see. This man that was caught by a security camera was a lonely man, and he was, well, busying himself while calling a 1-900 phone line at work. For his sake now, as well as ours, we'll keep evidence against him to a minimum.
Well, we received information from the phone company through our auditing system that we were receiving a lot of phone bills for the 900 phone sex taking place at the criminal courts complex. These calls seemed to have been taking place after hours where there shouldn't have been anybody inside. And quite honestly, we figured out real quick that it had to have been somebody that was working security. So we set up a little surveillance camera in the control booth, and lo and behold, we catch the security guard late at night dialing the sex phone numbers. But I think more humorous than that is we found him buck naked. Well, of course, he denied it until we showed him the video, and of course, after he saw his own video and his naked body on the TV screen, he realized that we had him. And there was no denying that he was the one making the phone calls.
In Providence, Rhode Island, you may not sell toothpaste and a toothbrush to the same customer on a Sunday.
Hey, years ago, somebody told me this joke that I still don't get. How many anarchists does it take to change a light bulb? Fish. Now, if that makes sense to you, what you're about to see will probably seem perfectly logical, but for the rest of us, it belongs in the ranks of America's dumbest excuses.
You know, usually whenever we're working out DWI patrols on a routine patrol, we stop a drunk. First thing he says, I've had 2 beers. That's the common answer, 2 beers. Well, one night I was up patrolling, and I stopped one of these guys. As I stopped him, before I could get out of the vehicle, he got out of his truck. And when he did, he kind of fell over against the truck and having trouble standing up. So I kind of hurried up to him, and I said, "Sir, you all right?" And I could smell the alcohol. I said, "How much you had to drink?" He just kind of leaned over against his truck. He said, 2 days. He'd been out drinking. I guess he'd been 2 days. He poured himself into the back of my unit, and we took him in.
It was early in the morning on a summer morning. It was pretty warm outside, and they dispatched us to assist police. We arrived at this restaurant. Police officers had been inside and said that there was a nude man dangling from the ceiling in the kitchen. The person that found him, the early morning person that came to the restaurant to clean up, she goes to her cooking station. It was a small walk area right underneath this vent, and here's this man dangling completely naked from the waist down with his legs kicking and hearing some screaming. She calls 911, and so we put up ladders and got up there, and we noticed that there was a male sticking out of a vent. When we got to him, we asked him if he had a permit to operate as a Santa Claus in the city and county of Denver. Get out of here! He responded angrily, and he really wanted to get out of that vent at that point. And we came up with the idea of WD-40. Took about 15 minutes to get him good and lubed up, and then boom, we jerked him out. At that time, he started to shake, and he had been exposed to the weather for quite a while, and we put him on a backboard and lowered him down, and he was off to jail.
All right. In driver's ed, they teach you that red means stop, yellow means caution, and green means go. But what does it mean if you sit at an intersection and are endlessly astonished at this riveting light show? Red, yellow, green. It means you've earned a slot in tonight's Blue Light Special.
Don't get us wrong. We're all for using extreme caution when driving. But the guy behind the wheel here was going nowhere fast. He watched this little rainbow several times without moving, which made the officers in the patrol car directly behind him suspicious, so they decided to talk to him. But suddenly, the car that wouldn't go wouldn't stop. As officers would later learn, the man was experienced at driving like this. After all, he already had 3 DUIs to his credit. In good time, all things came to an end, and the officers encouraged the passenger of the car to get down and hug the ground in gratitude that he and his sauced chauffeur had met up with the law instead of a tree. Let this be a lesson to you. Use caution in choosing your rides, because you never know when you might get stopped.
Not to like about this next story. Even the skimpiest details are intriguing. It involves a ball-peen hammer, an impervious safe, and a ton of coins. And that's just for starters. For the whole story, we take you to Kaufman, Texas.
I was working 2 burglaries here in Kaufman, and one of them was at a hardware store. The only thing they'd taken out there was a ball-peen hammer. And the other one was where someone had went into the bank through the roof. Turned out they'd used the ball-peen hammer to beat a hole in the roof to get in and They tried to get into the vault. They couldn't get in there, so they just took all the change that was laying out in the bags. It was about $3,000 in nickels, quarters, and dimes. It wasn't really hard to catch him because he went to a car lot and paid $3,000 in cash and nickels and dimes and quarters for a car. Everybody said that he had a lot of money, but really not a lot of sense.
We got a call to go to an Elks Lodge. One of the members had come in on a Saturday morning to open up, do a little cleaning. He walks in, opens up, and hears someone going, "Hey, excuse me, give me some help." And he walks back and, to the big conference room, and there's this guy laying on the floor. He looks up at the ceiling, and he sees a hole, and he says, I should call the police. So we go around, and it's one of our local bad guys we've arrested before for break-ins. So we end up carrying him to the hospital. He's got 2 broke ankles. Basically what happened, he broke in through the ceiling tile, or the top of the ceiling, fell through, and broke both his feet, and laid there for 2 days. After interviewing him, I said, "Is there anything else different you do?" And he goes, "Next time I'll bring rope."
When traveling, the crew of ADC eats at Tony Roma's. Tony Roma's, over 200 locations worldwide.
And now with the news, from a man who puts the anchor in Anchorman, here's Daniel with the ADC headlines.
When a robber confessed to sticking up over 24 banks, he used a truly original excuse. He said the money went to finance his addiction to attending Los Angeles Raiders football games. Okay, wouldn't it have been perfect if this guy's favorite team had been the Steelers, right? Participated in internet auctions, spending over $3 million on items ranging from a Van Gogh painting to a replica of a Viking ship. The problem? He was 13 years old, and his allowance just wouldn't cover that kind of spending. Well, like lots of us older consumers, it all hit the fan when the bills came due. Lucky for him, no criminal charges were filed. It's hard to remain anonymous when you do what this bank robber did. He entered the bank where he had an account and demanded cash from a teller he had once asked out. She knew his name, she had his number, and he got nowhere fast. And that closes the file on ADC Headlines. News ripped from somewhere near the back of your local newspaper. Debbie?
Things couldn't have worked out more neatly for this escaped prisoner if he'd had "Return to Sender" stamped across his forehead. His story becomes part and parcel for tonight's special delivery.
Fellow co-workers of mine had arrested a criminal. He was brought back to the police district. While he was in there, he seen his opportunity to get away. So he runs, leaves the police station, gets about 4 or 5 blocks away, sees a car that stopped. He asked them if he can get a ride. He said, "Police are chasing me." Once he gets in the car, they start driving back toward the police station. As they get closer and about to pull into the lot, he then realizes that these are police officers and unmarked police vehicle.
No animals were hurt in the reenactment you're about to see. So don't start writing us cranky letters, okay? However, you will see a crook who learns an electrifying lesson about getting his wires crossed.
I'm Deputy Calvin Denny from Pinellas County Sheriff's Florida in Largo, Florida. We had an interesting case of the parrot nappers. We had 3 subjects enter a wooded area where a Florida Power transformer was located. Their purpose there was to steal parrots that roost or nest in between the transformers for their girlfriends. Well, they parked their car on the dirt road, then proceeded to the rear of the transformer station, which is usually enclosed by a 6-foot fence. They weaseled their way through the fence, and one of the subjects had a 10-foot metal pole. Now, we're talking about a transformer, which supplies electricity for probably 20,000 to 30,000 residents. So the 3 subjects enter the transformer enclosure. One of them then hears the parrots. He goes up with his metal pole, hoping to shake up the parrots that were roosting in there. He received a jolt of 15,000 volts of electricity through that metal pole, which knocked him entirely off his feet and his partner. After doing so, Sheriff's Department deputies were summoned. They were all charged with felony trespassing. So they got a little bit more than a parrot.
Now, let's look back at one of ADC's greatest hits from the year 1997.
Spring training started off with a bang as juvenile detention centers in Harris County, Texas began recruiting for inmates.
Strike 1, 1 year's probation. Strike 2, do the crime, will guarantee the time. Uh-oh, traded to the Texas Youth Commission for 1 year. Strike 3, transferred to the majors as this ambitious arsonist is over the age of 18. He signed up for 5 years for felony theft and damaged property. And with this woman's discovery, they are out of there.
In Salt Lake City, it's illegal to walk down a street carrying a paper bag containing a firearm.
I was working afternoon shift, so I'm listening to the scanner and I hear an ATL, which is an attempt to locate, for a hit-and-run vehicle. I'm driving down the road, minding my own business, and there it is, right in front of me, getting on the freeway. Follow it for a little while and notice it's weaving in the road. Some good indicators for DUI, so I get it stopped, go up and make contact with the guy, and I don't say anything about the hit-and-run problem. I just talk to him, try and find out what's going on, get his license and registration from him, and then get him out on the side of the road and we do some field sobriety tests. And decide, well, it's time to arrest him for DUI. And when I inform him of this, he wants to go back and get his cigarettes out of the car. And I try to get after him because I know once he gets to the car, he could have a weapon in there or jump in the car and take off. Well, unfortunately, the latter was the case. He wanted to jump in the car and take off. Reaches for the ignition and gets the car started. I reached in to turn off the ignition, and the ignition switch comes out in my hand. Craziest thing you've ever seen. It was nuts. So anyways, he's got this car going now, and I try to get him to turn the car off. I can't turn the car off. He hits the gas and takes off. So the pursuit is on. Run back to my car. We chase him in and out of neighborhoods and whatnot. He finally ditches the car, and he's able to jump a fence, get away from us on foot. The main thing is I've got his registration and his driver's license still on my clipboard in my car. By running like that, he turned 2 misdemeanors into a felony charge and ended up having to do time over there.
Our final criminal tonight finds himself caught in the clutches of the double jeopardy of twins.
Yes, and as a kindness to you, our viewers, the parts of the officers will not be played by the Olsen twins.
Hey, watch it, I like them. Travel with us into the twilight zone of We're Not Making This Up.
Well, about 15 years ago when I first got in law enforcement, I had a twin brother who was also in law enforcement in another community about 100 miles east of where I lived. And we were both assigned to jail divisions, and one morning about 5 o'clock, the U.S. Marshal Service brought a prisoner into the jail, and he wouldn't get out of the van when he saw me, and we couldn't figure out why. And so finally I went and asked him, I said, man, why don't you just get out of the van and come on, let's go to jail and get it over with. He said, I'm not getting out of jail. You're going to whip me again. And I said, I've never met you. Well, talked with him just a minute and found out that my twin brother was the officer that released him from the jail that he was coming from, and he just couldn't understand how if the deputy marshal was driving as fast as he was, getting him from one town to the other, how I could have driven faster, changed uniforms, and met him in the Sally Port just to make his life miserable while he was in jail.
That's just too weird for words, you know? Well, like when people come up to me and ask if we're brother and sister.
Oh, you have got to be kidding.
No,
Well, what do you say?
Well, I say, look at the difference in our heights. And then I say, she's my half-sister.
You had to go low, didn't you?
Yeah, only to find you, babe.
Daniel! Well, we've got to go for now, but you'll find us right here next week with more bad news, bad jokes for criminals.
Well, yeah, and other people. And if you haven't visited our website yet, surf on over. The address is www.dumbcrimes.com.
Thanks to officers who make this show possible.
And to all who serve society and law enforcement, our sincere gratitude. The world would be a much scarier place without you.
Thanks for joining us. And as always, we hope that we've all learned from others' mistakes.
But if you haven't, we just might see you next week on America's Dumbest Criminals.
Bye-bye.